Welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem Podcast. We interview remarkable and thought-provoking guests about innovation, leadership, and change in the world of business. Whether you're an executive or an entrepreneur, our objective is to help you and your organization create an entrepreneurial culture, become more innovative, and better able to respond to change. Each week, we'll deconstruct world-class performance from the arenas of business, academia, science, and sports. Each week, you can expect key insights, fresh perspectives, and proven tools you can use straight away to make you more successful professionally and personally. With your hosts, Marc Bidwell and Roddy Miller.
This week's guest is Marc Vollenweider, CEO of Evalueserve, a fast-growing company that serves over 20% of the Fortune 1000 and is at the very heart of some of the disruptive innovations we've been talking about throughout the series so far. Marc describes how his global team of over 3,000 professionals are increasingly relied upon by clients to leverage his company's Mind+Machine strategy in service of creating value through innovation. He describes how some of the key elements of the most sought-after jobs in the corporate world, specifically on Wall Street and in management consulting, are being automated away, leading to unprecedented levels of talent losses. He has a unique perspective on the changes undergoing the corporate world. As a former partner at McKinsey, as a founder of a hugely successful business, and as a CEO of a company in the midst of disrupting itself to take advantage of new opportunities arising from technology, regulation, changing demographics, and his unique strategy of leveraging minds and machines. Enjoy. So welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem. With me today is Marc Vollenweider, who's a CEO and co-founder of Evalueserve, the first pure-play knowledge process outsourcer, which launched in December of 2000 and now has more than 3,200 employees worldwide, delivering over 7 million hours of research and analytics a year. In 2015, Marc co-founded a cloud-based startup, Inside B, which uses Evalueserve's network of research consultants to produce personalized, cost-effective, and qualitative reports, which I myself have used several times. And this is a prime example of Evalueserve's Mind+Machine strategy, which offers a delivery model that disrupts the research industry. And we're going to talk a little bit about this in a minute. Prior to starting Evalueserve, Marc spent a decade at McKinsey & Co. So welcome to the show, Marc.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks very much for having me.
So you were at McKinsey for over a decade, and I'm curious, what led you to leave and to go out on your own to become an entrepreneur?
Yes, thank you. McKinsey has always been quite entrepreneurial in nature. So in 1999, I went to India together with McKinsey, and amongst other things, was also in charge of what is called the McKinsey Knowledge Center, which is a back office research operation of McKinsey worldwide. And I had the chance to start this when it was like only 5 FTEs or 5 people in a hotel room in the Taj Palace Hotel in Delhi. So we grew it to about 120 people by the year 2000, at which point I sort of saw that there was potentially a business opportunity to create something like Evalueserve. And I've always had this idea of creating a company or setting up a company, doing a startup myself. And this is when I took the plunge because I said it's now or never. And that's how I got going.
Okay, so Evalueserve, I mean, how does it work? What's special about it?
Evalueserve started out as based on geographic cost arbitrage, as a company that provides research and analytic in a completely customized fashion to end users around the world. So say banks, consulting firms, and corporates. So basically a head of strategy would be able to say, I need 20 the competitive profiles of the top 20 players in my field, in my industry, and we would put everything together and deliver. These days, of course, it's much more complex and the solutions have become much more complex and it's globalized and has much more technology. But the fundamental idea is to provide customized research and analytics.
So this was back then the first pure play knowledge process outsourcer, which was taking advantage, I guess, of significant changes in or differences in labor rates. I mean, how has that marketplace developed over the last 15 years?
Correct. I mean, the first pre-existing models in the whole field were like GE Capital or American Express, TRS. They had already started providing some analytics from India to the rest of the world, but it was still captive in the sense that they did it for internal purposes and they used Indian teams to run the work. Over the years, and we were the first ones to provide this as a third-party service to companies in our field. Now, how has it evolved? Initially, it was really based purely on geographic cost arbitrage. So somebody in India, some employee in India, had just simply, lower salaries. The salaries were maybe 20 to 25% of what they are in the West. But then over the years, things changed rather quickly and dramatically. So the business globalized. So it was no longer India as such. It became China. It became for Asian work. It became Chile for the Western time zone, for the Californian time zone, for American time zones in general. Then we went onshore, closer to our clients. So Raleigh, Durham in North Carolina or Romania, because clients increasingly wanted to have capacity closer to their businesses and ultimately even on site. So our people spending the analytics time or providing the analytics service inside the client office location. So the engagement model morphed a lot. So that was one evolution that we went through. Another one was that the type of work we did became more and more complex. So it went from initial pure market research or simple secondary research more and more into financial processes like advanced equities research analytics, including the valuation models, or supporting investment banks in various processes around corporate finance or trading or risk. And in data analytics, things went more in the direction of big data, Internet of Things, these kinds of services. So there was an explosion of types of services or types of use cases, as we call them these days, that we went through. And then finally, it became also very clear that geographic cost arbitrage would not be there forever. I mean, it is still there, but already now the Indian salaries have come up rather quickly and will continue to do so. So therefore, it became very clear that automation had to be a very significant part of our work and process reengineering. So we started rebranding the company under Mind+Machine, so Evalueserve powered by Mind+Machine, which basically just gives a story of increasing amounts of automation, making the processes faster, better, and enabling clients to do new things that they couldn't do beforehand. So the business has morphed very considerably during the last 15 years.
And we'll come back to that Mind+Machine strategy in a minute. But as clearly there was a huge amount of change on that journey. I mean, 2 or 3 fundamental shifts in the economics and the business model and the client delivery model. And at the same time, you were advising clients, many of whom are senior leaders responsible for developing strategies to deal with disruption, to continue to out-innovate the competition. I'm curious, how did you manage the working with clients to help them meet those needs, which have become more extreme over time, I guess, as a result of changes in technology, the same trends that are facing your business, and at the same time manage the growth of your business from 1 employee to 3,200 employees?
Absolutely. I mean, you can imagine that we went through the usual pains of growth in all of this, but it was, of course, double as tricky because we had to morph in a market that got very much influenced also by crises. So, for example, the financial crisis of 2008, that was clearly driving a lot of need for innovation at the client's end. Initially, we just performed work that was given to us, almost like work packages, and then we tried to do things efficiently, of course, and deliver it back. But then increasingly, clients expected us to come up with innovation. for them to be using. So these days, any governance call with our clients requires us to bring a list of ideas for new capabilities that the client could be using in order to differentiate in their marketplace, not just how we could do the work better.
So, can you, sorry to interrupt, I mean, can you give an example without naming specific clients, but I mean, perhaps for our listeners, many of whom I think are probably in the more mature, industrialized, slower moving, long product life cycle industries that perhaps are heavily regulated. Any examples of how you would approach, let's say, a new client in the financial services industry?
Yes, in the financial services industry, for example, let's take M&A. Let's take the typical bankers. So far, a lot of their back-end processes, for example, pitch book production. These are the pitch books that they bring to any meeting with the CEO. That you usually have on the table for about an hour. And then in the end, you go through, after having gone through the actual pitch and the ideas, they leave it behind. So that requires a lot of analytics. For example, comparables, valuation comparables. It has to do with a lot of profiles of potential targets and things like that. So a lot of work goes into such a pitch book. Typically, these are up to 100-page documents. And on average, junior bankers would spend nights and nights on these. So what would we do there? These days, we bring a whole re-engineering suite of productivity tools to the table where things get sped up quite massively, up to 50% of the total workload can now be semi-automated. Just a little example that is really almost embarrassingly simple, but it always has a very high recognition effect amongst executives, is the logo topic. So, for example, we've created a database of 40,000 clean logos that are prepared for graphics work. So they look transparent, and they're not like when you stick them somewhere, they don't create these ugly white boxes in the background. So we've created a logo database of 40,000 clean logos and some macros that pull these logos in seconds and stick them in the right places in these documents. Believe it or not, an average investment bank spends about 6,000 hours each year on copying and sticking such logos somewhere. Now, we've eliminated 95% of that time, having a very simple asset of logos that we use everywhere. So this is just one of about 50 different functionalities that, for example, the banking suite of productivity tools has in it. And we bring these ideas to the table. And the banks want these ideas. So we need to propose a constant flow of new ideas, which of course has put us under a lot of pressure. So our employees then have idea generation sessions all the time, where we see these needs emerging, where we see these ideas emerging, and then we try to build functionalities that we put on a platform to then deliver it to the client. So it's very much a dynamic race for the newest and best and latest functionalities. And of course, the challenge that this brings for us is we automate away a lot of the human work, which is actually the mainstay of our revenue. So we are kind of cannibalizing our own revenue in order to grow, which means it's a double whammy, right? On the one hand, you're automating away your own work. On the other hand, you need to grow, which basically means in order to achieve a 10% growth or a 15% growth every year, we actually need to grow by about 20%, because otherwise we cannot sort of overcompensate for the automation aspect of things. So that has been the race for the last few years, and I think it's going to continue in this way for quite a while.
So, I mean, this is fascinating. I mean, I think, and let's come back to the leadership challenge that places on you as the founder of the company in a minute. But as I think about your clients, you meet with hundreds of decision makers a year, and you provide your services to all sorts of industries and verticals, around the world. As you meet with the leaders of these companies, in industries, many of which are under attack from new entrants, from new technology, from changes in demand and consumer demand or taste. Can you, and going back, you've been in business for over 25 years. What are you seeing in terms of how the best leaders or the most effective leaders in these organizations are thinking about these changes versus perhaps those that are being left behind because they're not necessarily being agile enough? I mean, are there any sort of things that you recognize in terms of the characteristics or the behaviors of the leaders who really got their minds around this and are taking their organizations forward in this environment?
Yes, indeed. There are such approaches that will probably work better than others. I mean, the first one is clearly establishing the need to change. That is where already I see a lot of differences, even in the same industry. Let's say, for example, let's just stay with the banking industry, or we could also add professional services, especially in the industries where there is a big regulatory thrust, like, for example, currently in financial services, lots of things are changing simultaneously. In fact, one CEO told us in a group speech that their bank was faced with 88,000 regulatory changes last year. So even if every employee of their bank did something or took one of these regulatory changes, they would still not have been able to comply with all the changes. So therefore, we've seen that, especially in these industries where the external regulatory pressure is high, there is, of course, the need. Others, for example, professional services, are less subject to regulatory change. And there's a huge difference between the leaders that really sort of put everything openly on the table and then say, we need to change. So, for example, consulting. Consulting model has been the same forever. The delivery of the product ultimately is still a presentation and a PowerPoint. Mm-hmm. Now, disruptors are coming along, giving completely different ways of delivery. So, for example, big data projects. They're being delivered through dashboards, through platforms, and no longer through the PowerPoint. So the big consulting firms need to adapt to that. Are they doing it? Well, some do, some don't. So I think that's one point. The second point is then once they know what to do, the disruption has to come, of course, from within, and it's always tricky to innovate inside an existing system. So the intrapreneurial setup is important. For example, in our case, what we've chosen to do was to put Insight B and the whole development of Insight B completely outside the existing structure. We did not use the internal IT. All IT was done, surprise, surprise, in Switzerland and not in India. So we didn't go for price. We went for who could deliver it in the fastest possible way to the right specs. Mm-hmm. User interface design, again, done through a professional services firm in London called Every Interaction. And you can go on forever. Mm-hmm. So we completely changed the model because we saw that inside the existing model, such an approach would simply not work. Also, there would have been maybe the fear of the cannibalization, which is minimal, but still it was there. So, say, intrapreneurial setups where people gave very clear accountability on let's call it use case by use case basis. So one person responsible for one use case, I think that's a key. Mm-hmm. Sort of this fuzzy, let's innovate kind of approach, and then maybe have a big R&D center and a totally functional approach to these businesses where you put the innovation into the R&D center and you put the other sort of sales into the general sales function, and then marketing into the general marketing function. That I haven't seen work very well. However, if there was an integrated accountability for such initiatives, then things usually work. So there's maybe also a very big difference. Mm-hmm. And then the third, and we can afterwards talk about more, but I think one of the key learnings or the key third differentiator was that these people learned a lot from their experiences around each of these use cases. So there was sharing of these best practices across the whole platform of innovation, so that other entrepreneurs would not make the same mistakes again, point one, or point two, could use the same infrastructure of external vendors and methodologies developed to just latch on the next innovation much more quickly, and thereby not trying to reinvent the world all the time. So these were maybe at a generic level the three key differentiators between the more innovative companies and more successful approaches of leaders compared to maybe the ones that were a little more sluggish or slower in their approach to innovation.
Okay, and as you talk, what's clear to me is that there's a lot of people who've either working to get their MBAs with an eye on working for joining a big consulting firm, or go to Wall Street, and yet you're talking about the disruption that's undergoing these two industries. Most of the first couple of years of a new associate in one of these big investment banks is probably developing those pitch books in the first place. So what would you say to either people considering those kind of organizations or those kind of industries as a career, or for people who are in there at the moment in these companies? How would you advise them to think about their careers, given these changes, given the need to be entrepreneurial, to be in front of these changes, if you like? I mean, any thoughts on observations as to how people right in the firing line of these disruptions, if you like, should be thinking about it? And I don't think the answer is necessarily go off and go and join a fintech startup. I don't think that's necessarily the answer, is it?
Yeah, correct. But it is true that we have seen a dramatic change in the labor market during the last few years. And we see this because lots of our clients are subject to them. Just to give you a couple of examples. The first one is that an American chief administration officer of one of the global investment banks told me that they have lost 70% of the first year MBA class in their junior banking class in 2015. We've also heard...
To where? Do you know where they've gone to?
Yes, they have gone to currently all these startups like the Ubers of this world, the unicorns, as you could say, or simply for lifestyle reasons, they have decided to join any other type of company, so say consulting firms or normal corporates in the marketing department or wherever, because I think especially the millennials, they start becoming more aware of this, and therefore it's very interesting that these days some of the investment banks even go to campus jointly with us and then basically say that they're working with Evalueserve to create a tool set that will allow the junior bankers to do more interesting stuff rather than create pitch books. So very strange effects that you're suddenly seeing, or it's in Asia. It's also very distinct in China. I was just talking to the COO of a bank in China, not a Chinese bank, a Western bank, and they have had an attrition of 60% in the front office in 2015. So I think the challenge for these people to keep highly motivated and highly trained individuals is definitely increasing. So therefore, I think what will have to be done, I mean, if I had to give advice to such people, what would I do? If I were somebody with an MBA, or maybe not an MBA, but maybe a PhD in something quant, say a PhD in operations research or in FinMath or financial mathematics, or in these kinds of more quantitative arenas, I think this is definitely a very good opportunity right now to stay with these banks or to stay with the consulting firms, because there will be lots of opportunities to grow. Where I guess just running after the wave of startups might not necessarily be, working all the time in the future, especially when valuations come down. But I think there's going to be a very, very interesting field in the financial services industry and professional services where such changes are happening. The second point is clearly that they should be looking for companies that are innovative, that go for such changes, that develop new models. Because if you go for, say, a consulting firm that is still very stale in its approach, the likelihood that you will get a leadership opportunity or a small P&L or a small kind of internal startup at young age is very limited. Mm-hmm. And therefore, selecting the players that are more dynamic in nature is probably critical. And there are very, very good examples of such firms that are driving this innovation, and others maybe that they are not. And that's how I, as a say 25-year-old or 27-year-old MBA, that's how I would pick these opportunities. But just because it's of personal interest, one of the husband of one of my goddaughter is actually currently going exactly such a situation, and he's in an industrial conglomerate. Mm-hmm. Even there, right? You have fantastic opportunities now with Internet of Things, with Industry 4.0, and companies like GE or similar innovators. They're creating huge amount of opportunities for driving such intra startups, and I guess. From that perspective, that would be the recommendation. Go for something that really gets you growth opportunities as general managers and people who create internal startups.
So, and let's put you back in the picture here a little bit, Marc. I mean, you as we said at the beginning, you set up a business last year, which is essentially cannibalizing your core business, and you've got 3,200 people in the core business, I think, and a much smaller number in Insight B. How, as a leader, and I guess you've got in that workforce quite a lot of millennials as well. So, what is this? What is this demanded of you as a leader as you've taken your organization through this change? I mean, I'm assuming you've done the things that you recommended, which established the need for change, building the organizational structure, this rapid learning, which you talked about earlier on. But what's this demanded of you as a leader as you've taken your company through this transformation?
Yeah, and the transformation is far from being finished. We are still in the middle of it. But I would maybe de-emphasize the cannibalization a little bit, because by now we have actually seen that there is a huge amount of synergy between the two. That's a very interesting side effect, which we initially didn't realize there was, but now actually we are transforming the whole business and not just the startup. So it's very interesting.
And is that because you've managed to use more machine and less mind in your core business?
Well, let me give you an example. Currently, Insight B was initially thought to be a cloud platform for pay-as-you-go market intelligence. Very simple, right? You have a request, you get it answered, it's via the cloud, it's fully knowledge managed, it's mobile, it's pay-as-you-go.
And it's great, I should say. As I said, I've used it a couple of times, and it's a brilliant service.
Thank you. So basically, the idea was to reach, or still is to reach, about 1 million people out there who are kind of not having this kind of support that, say, that a McKinsey or a BCG would give to its consultants. So that was the vision. And it seems to work quite nicely. It's growing quite nicely. But then we saw that this was actually a platform capability. So we are now launching a whole series of products on it that are actually also transforming the core business. So, for example, sales intelligence on Insight B, which is focused on supporting key account sales forces by giving them sales opportunities and tracking specific qualified and relevant sales opportunities. The next product that's going to be launched is procurement intelligence, which is targeted at indirect intelligence manager, indirect procurement intelligence managers. Mm-hmm. So we can now launch at a fraction of the cost of what it cost us to launch Inside B. We can add new products on a pay-as-you-go basis. Now, suddenly we realize that our core clients, say the industrial conglomerates who have, of course, large, or banks who have large indirect procurement departments, they suddenly jump onto this platform. Or you see, for example, sales forces in large corporates that jump on this platform. Why? It's a new model, it's cloud-based, it's much faster, it has zero upfront cost, and it's a completely new economic model. You're getting it up and going in a few minutes, as opposed to several months of implementation projects before. So I guess the point is, we started out with a nice idea and a patent application, and we got it going, but then started realizing that this can actually transform the core business as well. And now the question, of course, is how do we run all of it? And we've chosen the approach of saying one product is one golden nugget. We call them golden nuggets. So procurement intelligence, for example, is one such golden nugget. And it has a leader, a single leader, with full accountability at the P&L level. So every new product that we're going to launch on this cloud platform on Inside B is going to have such a P&L and a leader. And this is how we're going to run it in the future. So I think the point is that this platform approach enables us to have far more innovation much more rapidly, point one. And point two, limit the probability of failure for each of these additional products, because of course all the rest of the infrastructure is already there. The commercial engine is there, the knowledge management is there, the IT platform is there, the apps are there. All you need to do is you focus on your new product. So I think that's really, that was the surprise that we had when we started introducing Inside B. Now, when it comes to the organizational challenge, it's true. Initially, we had to do a lot of convincing. It was essentially initially Marc's pet project. Everybody smiled at it a little bit. And I, of course, knew that. So I took it with the necessary amount of humor. But, we put the right budgets in place. We gave the right responsibility to people. And I think that was important. We took out the best people from the current organization to run this. So the guy running the Inside B, and you know him, it's Manoj Madhusudanan. Mm-hmm. He actually managed 800 people before, and then he joined Inside B, and he became employee number one of Inside B, and started it. So taking the best people from your existing organization and putting them onto it, possibly also injecting some external skill, and definitely an external new approach for agile development, that I think is the key for such innovations.
Excellent. And I guess, the amazing thing as you talk is that you're seeing, on a daily basis in the core business, how large companies are managing these kinds of activities. So you've got a unique perspective that you can bring back into your organization and experiment with, which is quite unique, I think.
Yeah, correct. What we're trying to do is, we work for about 200 Forbes 1000 companies. So it's very important for us to capture the generic needs that these people have, these clients have. Of course, we cannot capture, let's say, any client confidential materials or so. That's, of course, very clean and separated through Chinese walls. But we understand the generic needs that people have. And then we can address these generic needs with our specific platforms. So say the sales intelligence platform on Inside B is a very specific response to a very specific use case for the client need. And so for procurement intelligence, and we're now launching, for example, health economics, a health economics product on Inside B via our life sciences practice, because again, that's the need. So what we're trying to do is we serve multiple clients already in the background. We sort of understand their processes and their needs, doing about 6 million hours of research and analytics every year. And then we try to find out sort of clusters of needs which we can then address with a point solution for a specific use case, and this will be put on Insight B. So it's kind of a nice outcome of having such a large initial business, because it gives you all the knowledge and market access. On the other hand, through Insight B, we get lots of leads for more customized work, and they will be played back to the enterprise version of Evalueserve. So it's kind of a give and take from both sides.
A virtual circle, yeah. So beginning to wrap this up, because we need to close this down in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to touch on your book, which is going to be talking about Mind+Machine. Now, what is the need that you've seen in the marketplace, and how is the book going to meet that need, Marc?
Yes, the book is, it was essential. It was actually Wiley and Sons that proposed to me to write this book for the purpose of a mainstream segment of what I call the non-specialists or the anti-nerds. Mm-hmm. So this is not for the data scientist with a PhD in operations research or FinMath. This is for the general manager who is simply overwhelmed by all the marketing collaterals of vendors proposing big data and data lakes and the likes. So it's really about demystifying analytics and mind and machine in this context to explain how do these things work, what are the choices that are available, and what are the questions that such managers should be asking if an internal team suggests to set up large data analytics teams centrally with huge running budgets and massive amounts of data and tools. So how can they simplify this whole analytic framework to exactly what they need? And I think we're proposing a methodology that we're using currently at Evalueserve to help people go through these decision trees. And I think one of the biggest findings from this is what we call the analytic use case framework. It's around single analytic use cases with very clear responsibilities, and then things usually get done and they have impact. So they bring kind of the payload to the moon. So there is initially really some return on investment, and that's really the key. The second part is that analytics as such is not just analytics. It's very much around how do we get the right content at the right time, at the right level of synthesis, or the right insight to the right person in the right format. So reaching the end user or the last mile is really the key. Yep. So they can actually act on the intelligence that they receive, as opposed to getting a 50-page PowerPoint document with no so what. So this is what we focus on in the book.
Yeah, and that last mile concept is a lovely one, because it resonates so well in the context of some of the challenges that your clients and a lot of the listeners are facing. And the book's going to be out in towards the end of the year, Marc?
I would assume so, yes.
Well, we'll be sure to let our listeners know about it when it's ready. So let's just go to the last questions, which I sent out to you in advance. 3 questions here, Marc. Firstly, what are your morning rituals?
Yes, I had to laugh when you sent me these questions, but I think they're very insightful. So I tried to sit down and think about them. So the first one, morning rituals. I do some yoga when I get up to get my back ready for the day. And of course, and that's the second morning ritual, I make my wife the first compliment of my 3 daily compliments of the day. So that's important in the morning. And for me, this is a ritual. Of course, when you make compliments to your wife, you have to make sure that you really mean it. Yep. But I'll try to achieve that.
Excellent. Okay, second question. What have you changed your mind about recently?
It is about my own role in the company, Evalueserve, and where I can add most value. So far, I felt that I had to be completely on top of every operational detail and, spend a lot of time with everyone, understanding the specifics of their problems. in globally, which meant tons of calls around the clock with everybody because we run Evalueserve as a virtual business. However, now I've made the decision to focus on three things. Focus on the book, of course. Focus on innovation, where coming up with the innovation, but then also implementing it and getting it into the market. And then, of course, key client meetings, so spending time with the most important clients, but not just the most important ones, also the most interesting ones, because even a very small company can be far more interesting and far more relevant for innovation than, say, a big bank. But these are the three areas, and this is where I had to change my approach really completely. So I have completely restructured my agenda or my calendar during the last 2 to 3 months.
Great. And final question, what advice would you have for your 25-year-old self?
Yes, I became an entrepreneur at the age of 35. I spent 10 years at McKinsey, so between 25 and 35, I became a partner at McKinsey, which was a great time. But I think what I would do these days, I would probably start my entrepreneurial career earlier, maybe at the age of 30 or even earlier. Of course, that means you have to have the right idea. But waiting until everybody's 35, I think, takes a long time. And so younger people, I would recommend to take an entrepreneurial opportunity in a reasonably sort of, in an environment where you don't have the full force of a fully fledged startup yet, but you can learn. And then afterwards, you can do a full external startup, maybe at the age of 30, 35.
Excellent. So where can people get in touch with you, Marc?
The easiest way to get in touch with me is via my email address at Marc, Vollenweider, so which is VOLLENWEIDER at evalueserve.com, or simply via LinkedIn, where I have my contact details.
Okay, and we'll put that all in the show notes. So, Marc, it's been a great pleasure having you on the show today. I'm sure our audience enjoyed it as much as I did, and thank you very much for your time.
And thank you very much for the opportunity, Marc.
This was, I found, a really insightful conversation from a CEO with a genuinely unique perspective on the changes taking place in the business world today. What struck me is that he's able to take advantage of his client-facing work, first with McKinsey and more recently in Evalueserve, and to distill the key learnings with his use case approach to test out new offerings for Insight B, the company he recently founded. The model he used to set up, staff, and develop this business is one that is relevant, I believe, for anyone developing new businesses within an existing organization. We'll be sure to keep you posted when his book on Mind+Machine is published. It will be an excellent complement to the work of an upcoming guest, Kevin Kelly, founder of Wired magazine, whose new book, The Inevitable, talks about the trends shaping and transforming our working and personal lives. Next week, I talk to Larry Cunningham, author of the definitive book on one of the most extraordinary companies in the world, Berkshire Hathaway. He describes in rich detail the cultural characteristics of the 50 subsidiaries that make up the conglomerate run by Warren Buffett and my business hero, Charlie Munger. There are some powerful takeaways for entrepreneurs and executives wanting to build sustainable, profitable businesses that ride out the inevitable business cycles. And in the meantime, if you like this, please head over to our website, innovationecosystem.com, all one word, where you can download a transcript, see the show notes, as well as sign up for our newsletter. And if you like this episode, please do go to iTunes and write a review. These shows do take time and energy to make, and we really would like to hear from you and to get our work out into the innovation ecosystem for executives and entrepreneurs alike to benefit from.